Welcome to today's program. This is part of the Chapter Leader Success Series. This series of programs is sponsored by the Chapter Leadership Circle chapters. So a big thank you to all the chapters that are part of that. We like to provide you all with tips and tricks to running your chapters more successfully. So your support helps fund that. So let's get started. I am Jenny Weisenbach, Chapter Services Director. And in today's program, we're going to be discussing chapter governance and strategic leadership. So what is chapter governance? And what do we mean when we say strategic leadership, and how are these two connected? So in a nutshell, governance is the way rules are structured and enforced. And guess who enforces those rules? The leadership, who strategically determines which rules to enforce. And that's the end of today's webinar. Okay, just seeing who is paying attention here. I'm totally just kidding. Please help me with this. The subject can be a bit dry. So if you have anything that you want to contribute, some actionable comments or anything, please don't hesitate to unmute yourself and jump right in or type something into the chat box. We want to hear from you. So governance, I wasn't lying. Governance is the way rules are structured and enforced. And it's the way these rules are structured and maintained over time. I like to think of it as the foundation or the wireframe that supports your chapter and the operations of your chapter. Strategic leadership refers to the way leaders lead. As I was working on the presentation, I highlighted the word strategic and opened the thesaurus to see what the antonym was, and it's unplanned. So that doesn't quite cover the depth of the phrase here. Unplanned leadership isn't the exact opposite of strategic leadership, but having a plan and a vision for your chapter is vital to being able to operate strategically. Having the plan isn't enough. This is why unplanned isn't quite the opposite. Having the plan isn't enough. It needs to be clearly and concisely communicated and broken down so that everyone working towards this common goal knows what they are expected to contribute and how their piece fits into the larger puzzle. So can good governance happen without strategic leadership? Can strategic leadership happen without good governance? Technically, yes, but I'm addressing the two concepts together because having that solid wireframe backing that's created with the good governance and then executing those ideals is so much easier when you have strategic leadership in place to direct your chapter. So we're going to break these down just a bit. Let me check my chat really quick. Okay, Julie, yes, you will get a recorded copy. And I should have said that at the beginning. This is recorded. It will be shared in CrewBiz. Today's Wednesday. It'll probably be either Friday or Monday. Okay, so to be completely honest, when I hear the word governance, my mind immediately goes to bylaws or policies and procedures, articles of incorporation. My mind goes to the things, the documents that exist to create a chapter. And that's because I help develop a lot of chapters. But and these are important because they help us determine how to perform the act of governance as a verb. Bylaws are the written legal rules. Bylaws define things at a very high level, like the chapter's official name, the purpose for your chapter, requirements for members, a lot of details that are very, very important. There are 4 key things, and Barbara's on here, so she's a lawyer, so she'll probably argue with me that I'm not addressing the most important parts or all of the most important parts, but I really want to focus on 4 key points in the bylaws. So that's the why. Why does Crew exist? Who is eligible to be part of Crew? How are the leaders picked, and what are those leaders tasked to do? So one common mistake is to include way too much detail in the bylaws, requiring amendments for really simple, small things. I had a chapter once that needed to revise their bylaws because they had a committee name change and it was put into the bylaws and they had to do an amendment to change the name of a committee. Instead of putting those details into the bylaws, I recommended that they identify the committees that are required to perform the operations of the organization, and then include a statement that gives the board the authority to rename or establish and decommission additional committees as needed. Let the appointed leaders lead. Okay. Policies and procedures are the day-to-day processes. This is where you record workflows, who's responsible for the details, and you document decisions that are made for historical reference. This is a living, breathing reference for your leaders, board and committees. These policies and procedures, I recommend that chapters break them down into committees. They should be they're an essential part of transitioning and onboarding your new leaders, both again, new board leaders and new committee members or committee leaders and members too, probably. I recommend that the relevant portions should be gone over, reviewed together by the outgoing and incoming leader, whether it's at the board level or committee level, so that questions can be asked and answered. It will also prompt the outgoing person to realize, oh, I forgot to write down this thing we did here, because they are living and breathing. Sometimes decisions are made or policies are changed, processes are changed, and we don't remember in the moment to detail them in the policies and procedures. So it's just a good practice to do that every single year. The bylaws should also be gone over every single year. Amended seldom, policies and procedures constantly updated. Okay. Articles of incorporation, certificates of nonprofit status, tax exempt letter, really anything that you file with the government, state, federal, provincial governments, all of those files should be archived. Send these to Crew Network. You archive them locally, keep redundant copies there, but send these to Crew Network and we will be happy to keep a copy in our files here. We have redundant storage systems, and redundancy is a huge, huge plus. Keeping these documents prove the existence and the status of your organization. So they are critical to have, and they can be hard to replace if you use them.
Don't even go there, because I would go, okay. I've done it once, I will totally do it.
So next, for some reason, my PowerPoint isn't moving the way I need it to. So my apologies here. Someone needs to mute. I'm not hearing any background noise, but I'll make sure everyone's muted. Okay. So we need to ensure, as part of governance with the files, we need to ensure that the organization remains in good status. As nonprofit organizations, this typically requires some annual reporting. Now, it is a bit different for Canadian and US chapters. So I'm going to start with the Canadian side because it's cleaner. Canadian chapters actually file, Canada and US does it completely opposite. Canadian chapters file for nonprofit status at the federal level, and then they register with their province. So all Canadian chapters can use this link that's on this slide right now, and you can go to the same place and you provide your annual updates. It's a simple online form for the online update. And then there are additional forms, and you'll see here, upon elections or change of officers, they need to file another simple form that identifies those changed officers. And then registered office address, articles, bylaws change. It's all done online. All can be accessed from this link. It's very simple. Yes, there is a minimal fee depending on which forms you're filing. So in the US, I'm sorry. In the US, we incorporate and apply for federal nonprofit status at the state level. That means every single state is different. Some require filing an annual form, others don't. I can't remember, it was one of the southern states I was checking, and their Secretary of State's website says specifically, we will not require you to fill a form out more often than every 6 years. So some are adamant that you don't file stuff, some are adamant that you do. There were some that I saw that had nice step-by-step YouTube guides. Others still use PDF printouts. So if you're in a state that doesn't make it easy, I apologize. Reach out to me. I'll be happy to help you. But go to your Secretary of State's website. I did this for several states. I went to the Secretary of State's website, just typed in nonprofit in the search bar, and it will lead you to what you need to do. And again, if you can't find it, let me know, and I will we'll get on a Zoom call and try to figure it out together. If you are required to file something other than an annual form, which again, some states require, others don't. The reasons are typically the same as what we saw on the previous slide for Canadian chapters. If you change the name of the organization, if you have newly elected officers, change to your bylaws, that sort of thing. So those are the common reasons that you have to go online and do this sort of thing. And some of them have tax filings that you have to do as well. So before I move off of the files, does anyone have questions about these? This was a very broad overview. So
yes, I do. Jenny, can I? Who in each chapter? What job description files? Who in the chapters files?
That is different for every chapter. I would say for the most part, it's the treasurer, and that should be defined either in the bylaws that the treasurer is responsible for that, or in the procedures that that is one of the treasurer's responsibilities. That's a good question. Anyone else before we move on? Can always come back. Okay. All right. So let's move on to the act of governing. So now we're going to go back to those 4 points that I referenced in the bylaws. Why does your chapter exist? Why does CREW exist? The mission. It is imperative to remain true to the mission, always. CREW Network, or CREW, all CREW, is here to transform the commercial real estate industry by advancing women globally. That's what we're here for. Who does your chapter serve? Your chapter serves your members. Our members are from every race, creed, socioeconomic status, every single type of diversity that we can find, but we are all commercial real estate professionals first. So our members are commercial real estate professionals. How? How are the leaders of the chapter selected? It's from within the members. The members are the leaders. So it's a process that should be very transparent. It's attainable by anyone within the chapter. That is also defined in the bylaws, how that process works. And then what are those leaders tasked to do to keep the chapter functioning effectively? Like Sarah's question, what are, treasurers should be required to check and see what the filings are, or check on the tax status. It might be the secretary that's required to check the Secretary of State's website and see if there's an annual report. That needs to be defined. Further, in the bylaws, it should be defined what the leaders are given the authority to do and what they need oversight to do. So it kind of states their limitations and their reach overall. The policies and procedures, those again are the record of how the rules are enforced and how the processes are managed. So the act of governance requires focus. Focus on these goals, focus on, this mission, and most importantly, transparency. Transparency is so crucial. So, and good governance implies that the leaders of your chapter have a comprehensive grasp of these basic concepts, and they execute them without bias. So leaders this does not mean you need to know every single detail about running every single committee, and you don't need to know everything. But leaders should know where to find the policies and procedures that are used on a day-to-day basis. Leaders should know where the bylaws are and have a general idea of how the who, what, how, why is structured, so that focus remains constant. Policies and procedures, bylaws, they should be reviewed regularly to keep the mission and focus and goals in sight. So some of you might have attended a webinar in March on strategic planning. And in that, question from Barbara Shampoo, execute without bias. What do I mean when I say execute without bias? I mean, if you have a rule that is in place stating that, I'm just going to throw this out there, that affiliate members have to have 5 years of experience in order to qualify for membership. But your BFF or your sorority sister from college, she just joined the industry, she's an affiliate member, and you really want her to be part of crew. You need to follow the rules. You can't make exceptions. You have to execute. You have to treat everyone the same. That being said, typically bylaws do have the ability for board members to be a little bit flexible here and there. So if something is needed, that's fine. They can override bylaws, but it does need to be done without bias. It shouldn't just be for your best friend. It should be for someone who, what they're doing can really advance or help the mission of the chapter. Again, the mission.
Thank you, Jenny.
Yep. So Wendy's webinar in March on strategic planning, she taught us that a strategic plan is a plan that it's a guide to ensure consistency year over year as leadership changes. So the plan is a tool, it's a resource that keeps the organization moving in a consistent direction, utilizing the wireframe structure that's established with governance, with all these rules and processes. Okay. So how does strategic leadership fit into all of this? We've talked about the good governance. How does strategic leadership fit into all of this? Strategic leadership enables the leaders of the chapters to focus on the goal, use the strategic plan and the wireframe established by good governance, while actively including the most voices and empowering collaboration to achieve those goals. So let's visualize this. So we're going to go bowling, right? The chapter comprised of members is your bowling ball. The goal is to knock down all the pins or break the glass ceiling. That's what we're here for. The governing documents are the bowling lane that helps to guide the chapter. Strategic leadership is, and I'm not a bowler, so I don't actually know the terms, but those inflatable cushiony thingies that they put in the gutters to prevent a gutter ball. It enables the leaders and the members of committees to use the entire lane. They can determine their bowling style. And the strategic leaders, the gutter blockers, keep the chapter on course, buffering against, going off into the gutter or some random project that's not central to the mission. So strategic leadership is enabling everyone to feel empowered to do their job while providing the rails. So what this actually looks like in action is going to be different depending on your chapter structure, specifically the board and the committee structure. Some chapters have what we call a strategic board. Others have a working board, and I don't like that word working because it makes you feel that the strategic board members aren't working. Everyone is working when you're on a board. The difference is in the delegation of responsibility. So directors of working boards are typically leading and actively doing committee work. Operational board, LaShawn, I knew there was another name for it. So in Crew Tampa Bay, they call it an operational board, not a working board. So I like that better. I'll change that on the slides before I send it out. The operational boards are active on the committee. They are leading the work, they are doing the work, they are more involved in the day-to-day processes. Smaller chapters typically have working boards or operational boards because they don't have the numbers and to delegate everything. They just don't have that many members. This can change with active grooming of new members for leadership positions, but all chapters start out with these smaller operational boards. Directors of strategic boards are typically assigned to be liaison to one or two committees. So they oversee what the committee does. Maybe they don't attend all of the committee meetings, maybe they do. They are there as a mentor to the committee chair to help build that succession and that leadership. They are there to understand what the committee is doing, to make sure those rails stay in place and the communications committee isn't going completely off the rails and deciding to create a new RSS feed about all the industry stuff that's going on in their market. That'd be awesome, but that's not what Crew is about. So they oversee. Yes, Barbara. Oh, you're still muted.
I said, I keep forgetting you can see me. So here's my question. I get everything that you just said. But as we know, a lot of what the different committees do overlaps and things like that. So if folks are set up to work in their lanes, how do you ensure that everything is properly integrated?
That's a very good question. And that's kind of where I think the liaison idea works really well, because at the board level, the directors will know how these, the communications committee overlaps with the events committee or the programs committee. So they will know and they will keep reminding, you need to communicate with the communications people. Hopefully the committee chairs also get that. A lot of chapters, and I really like this idea, a lot of chapters have people on the committees designated as liaisons to other committees so that they can be the voice that is, representing their committee. So a person on the events committee, their task on that committee is to attend the events committee meetings and then attend the communications committee meetings so that they can be that, they can bridge that gap. Okay. And strategic boards, as they're liaisoning, I think that's a verb, right? As they're doing that, they will communicate back to the board what is happening, big picture, so that the board knows that everything is staying on course. Okay. Both types, the operational board, the strategic board, both types are able to have strategic leadership. So strategic leadership requires articulating the clearly defined roles and goals for the people who are tasked to do the work, and then infuse them with passion. This is done so that you can not only distribute the responsibility, but it motivates the volunteers so they're empowered to find their own ways, follow their own ideas to achieve the goal put in front of them. Give them the entire lane to work with in case they have a cool bowling style or something. Strategic leaders should be able to passionately express the vision. They're transparent and they encourage conversation. Sorry, Kathy's chat just caught my eye. Has monthly committee collaboration calls to help coordinate and avoid overlap. Zoom has made it possible. That's great, Kathy. Thank you. Strategic leaders want to encourage communication about the reasons that are behind the vision so that the volunteers, they feel ownership and they're motivated to accomplish the work that's assigned to them. They know what they're doing They believe in the reason why they are doing it, and they're given the freedom to decide how to do it. This promotes collaboration, innovation, and ownership. So that is huge. Okay, I don't know what's going on here. All right. I did not mean to make those pop on like that, but there are tons of benefits to strategic leadership. There's that, like I said, the collaboration, the innovation, the new ideas, the excitement, hearing more voices. When you get more people involved, you have more perspectives. I mean, this is everything that diversity, equity, and inclusion talks about, is making sure that everyone is heard. And there's tons of benefits. I'm not going to read this slide to you. It will be in the resources. And I also have a handout that lists a bunch of qualities of successful leaders that I'll post. I found it really, I don't know, I just really liked it. So I found it. I'm going to post it for you. So ideally, strategic leadership will start from the top down, so board down to committees, but I know several of the people watching today are committee leaders. It can start with you. And then as your leadership skills are realized and you work your way up, you're going to affect change in the reverse direction and help make your boards more strategic. Okay. All right. Strategic leadership is never ending, especially with a volunteer-driven organization like Crew. Leaders change, but to set up for success, there are a few things that chapters should work to do. Here's just a few quick ideas. Develop and communicate a clear and consistent message of the goals. Don't try to boil the ocean. Put together your clear message so that everyone knows what they're trying to do. And then talk with each director and committee leader, perhaps the entire committee, to let them know their specific charge. What is expected of them? They want to contribute to the goals. Make sure they're familiar with the policies and procedures for their committees so they know what resources they have. Constantly communicate. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Be fully transparent. As we all learned in 2020, things happen and change is inevitable. Make sure to communicate to the committees if their goals or their resources change, or if they don't, because COVID happened, but we still expect you to do this. Make sure you're communicating. Over communication is not a thing in my book. And then express your passion for the organization. Express your thanks for the work the volunteers are doing. I appreciate each and every one of you for what you do for Crew. You're amazing. Make sure that your volunteers are getting networking time and value out of the service they're providing during their service, working for you as leaders, as board members, as committee leaders. Make sure that they have time to get to know one another and they're not just workhorses. Give them time to benefit their business, to make connections. Train your volunteers. Plan for succession. Leadership development is one of Crew's member benefits. It's something that we promote. We want women to have these leadership skills. Make sure new leaders have the proper tools and they know about the tools in their toolbox. So make sure they know that this series, the Chapter Leader Success Series, is a thing. We have several different programs, different webinars that are recorded and posted out on CrewBiz. If you're not sure what they are, shoot me an email. I'll be happy to tell you. There are playbooks out there. There are flyers out there. There are templates out there. If there's something that you think of that would be helpful for your chapter, let me know. Let me know. If it's something that we can do and that we think will help all chapters, we'll develop it and post it out there because we want to provide help to our chapters. So I can personally attest to the horror of being handed a stack, and I'm not kidding you, it was a stack of 11 by 17 papers detailing the entire financial history of Boy Scout Troop 81 and said, "You're the treasurer, go." I didn't have bank account information. I didn't have anything. It was horrible. Please don't do that. I never got the digital files. I had to recreate it all. It was horrible. Make sure they have tools. They know where those tools are and they know how to use them. And then let them go. Don't micromanage. Make sure they're staying within those guardrails. Make sure they remain focused on the end goal. Everything should be about the mission. Everything should be to help the members. And let them go. That's often the hardest part because they're not doing it the way you want them to do it, but they might have a better way. So, all right. So does anyone have policies and procedures templates available? Great question, Kathy. We do have very general ones. I think, and I will follow up. I'm making a note right now. Policies and procedures templates. Pretty sure there's at least 2 chapters who have shared theirs on CrewBiz in the Resource Center. I will include a link to that folder when I send out the resources afterwards. Okay, does anyone have any more questions for me? Yes, Barbara.
So to go back to your point about the strategic plan and strategic leadership, it seems to me that I've seen conflation between the mission and the goals, which is part of the strategic plan, as I understand it, or the mission vision, or the mission and/or vision and goals. But I've often seen things that are really committee level activities, committee level, tactics, kind of all jumbled up in that. And so it's hard to get the clarity that you mentioned. Any suggestions for that?
That's a really good question. It's depending on whether or not you're talking about the tactics or the measures.
Right.
If you're talking about the measures, in my mind, that needs to be determined by maybe the board or the committee chair. They need to be able to say, this is how we want to be able to measure this, the outcome of this goal. And then you let the committee, you let the worker bees figure out how they're going to do those tactics, how, what they're actually going to do there. And this is where it can get tricky, because the example I gave you of, the communications committee deciding that they want to create an RSS feed of every single, industry update in their market. Wouldn't that be amazing? That would be awesome if we had that. But that's putting a lot of resources, a lot of time, and probably money, because that's technology, into something that maybe isn't central to the communication committee's charge. Right. So that's in my mind, that's, kind of getting really close to being a gutter ball over there. That's, yeah.
And so, for instance, it wouldn't be something like, and committee XYZ is going to have a program on topic ABC in the fall. I mean, isn't that a little bit too granular for a strategic plan, or is it?
I would say for tactics, you could, Crew Network has tactics like that, where we say we are going to do a DEI program. We don't say necessarily what month we're going to do it in. But we do say, we're going to provide training to chapter leaders on this, in order to reach this.
But it's a tactic. It's not the mission or the goal, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the tactic, yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Appreciate it. Sorry to keep asking.
No, that's good. Anyone else have questions? If not, LaShawn, are you ready? I wanted to ask LaShawn Bates. She is the president of Crew Tampa Bay. They recently made a switch to becoming a more strategic board and just having kind of this strategic leadership. And so we talked, and she has some great suggestions, great ideas that she's willing to share with us. Are you?
Sure. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. So yeah, I mean, pretty straightforward, but thank you for that tee up, Jenny. And I know I've talked with Barb and a couple of other people, but Jenny and I were talking, and when I was looking at our, kind of how I was going to roll into the president's role for 2021, I kind of thought about what did I want to accomplish and, where the chapter was, and just really kind of figuring out what was my plan as the leader for the next year. And so the first thing that I kind of did internally was my own SWOT analysis of the chapter and figuring out what issues I wanted to solve for. And so once I kind of established those, I went out into Crew Biz, did a lot of emailing with Jenny and other leaders at Crew Network to come up with this vision of where we wanted to go. And it all kind of happened organically. The transition from an operational to strategic board was kind of grown by solving for problems that were continued challenges within our SWOT analysis, if that makes sense. So we couldn't fix those problems until we changed the way we were operating as a board. So hopefully that's clear. But the first thing I did was reach out, probably at the end of the day, a dozen different chapters and leaders I ended up talking to. And that was over a period of time, but really understanding from small chapters. I think it was Crew, did I decide it was Crew New Mexico, one of the smaller chapters that I got a lot of feedback, which didn't seem intuitive to what I was looking for, but they had so much information. And everybody from Philly to, I think I talked to Crew Detroit, just a ton of different people to kind of get their perspective on what procedurally they did to transition and why they made the change from an operational or working board to a strategic board. So the next thing I did was I kind of yeah, we need to do this. This is going to solve for a lot of our challenges. And essentially, we had been creating strategic plans, but we could never execute them because we were too busy planning events and working as a board. And so we had to create this organizational capacity for ourselves, I call it. But the next thing I did was I wanted to talk with the leaders because, as a bunch of highly educated, female leaders, we are, strong in our opinions and we kind of know what we want, but it was crucial to kind of gain buy-in from an executive committee and future leadership standpoint. I really wanted to get people behind it individually. So that was a lot of one-on-one coffees, virtual coffees, and this was all great because it was happening during COVID anyway. And so people had time and made themselves available to kind of talk about it. And so with that, I was able to gain insight from folks who maybe had more experience on the committee side, which I had been treasurer. I had been on a couple committees, but I didn't have super deep committee level experience. So I was able to get some information from them and just, that diversity of thought and opinion that we talk about. And so, yeah, that kind of goes in 2 and 3 kind of go together and really honing in based upon all that feedback from other chapters, from committee chairs and co-chairs and future leaders, and really just sitting down with the executive committee to put our plan together on how we were going to execute and what the time frame looked like. The one thing, and there's always a takeaway and lessons learned from a transition, and there are tons of them, but one of the ones that I focused on or I mentioned to Jenny is, I'm a big thinker. I had all these ideas. I had a great partner within the organization that was able to articulate and put together all of my thoughts on paper, but I didn't really prepare. We didn't prepare for that up front. It was like, oh, we got all these great plans, but we need a group of people and thought leaders to continue the work after. And so we created a strategic planning task force that we'll probably have as a committee, an ad hoc committee moving forward. And those will be those high level thinkers and I think that will ebb and flow. Like some years we'll have big initiatives and things that we need to, according to our strategic plan, come up with some more thought around. Sometimes we won't, but I think it's critical to prepare if you're deciding to go or make any huge change from your chapter. You kind of need to have what happens after we come up with all these great ideas. So that's just a quick summary of what happened in Crew Tampa Bay, and I'm happy offline to talk to anybody who wants to think about moving from an operational or working to a strategic board. How was that, Jenny?
That was fabulous. Thank you so much, LaShawn. I know it's often, I can spout these words, but it's good to hear from someone like LaShawn who's been, in the trenches with y'all so that she can tell you how to actually do it. I also talked with Jill McCarthy, Crew KC, and she is so sweet to have joined us after she's been out for a while. So thank you so much. If you want to pipe up.
Yeah, sure. So I had foot surgery last week with, we got some screws and plates and bolts and things in. So up until yesterday, I haven't been dressed, but I am still at home. And I was kind of like, my phone rang this morning. I was like, oh my God, I have to get dressed today too, because going to be on this call with everybody. But I would say we moved really from the operational to strategic a few years ago. So we have some practice at it. And generally at the end of the year, when we get ready to transition from, this year's board to next year's board, we always in December do a longer kind of maybe a 4-hour meeting instead of an hour meeting, but part of it is social or there's a fun activity, but it's about bringing together the existing board and the new board coming in. And we open it also, our board meetings are always open to our co-chairs of committees. So the directors would be on the board, but the co-chairs are always invited to any board meeting, and many take advantage of that. And they're the ones you tend to see pop up into board leadership, maybe a little faster than some of the others. And then in January, we always really go through each committee's, what's their plan and kind of designate that out. And I guess the tactical part of that would be each committee's report to the board each month basically has outlined, what's the committee? It's communications, who's the director, who are the co-chairs. We put in there, if you need board approval, it's about a policy change, it's about financial impact over X dollars or something outside of what you've already budgeted for that was turned in, by December of the year prior. And then they always list their goals for the year, any key tactics to establish those goals. They'll list out just kind of in bullet points, accomplishments from the last meeting, and then accomplishments planned for the remainder of the year. And then of course, the next committee meeting is always on that. It's a nice template, I think, for everybody to get the information that's needed to go from committee level to board. And then that director or the co-chair will highlight kind of the things that happened or things that are planned for the future that they're seeking input on. But for the most part, all that happens at the committee level. And so when you get to the board level, we're really there more to rally and give support. And I feel like to make sure things are gelling. Occasionally, I told Jenny the other day that we had one of our committees that had come up with this program and they're just running down the rails with it, which is great, but they had not included programs or sponsorship or the treasurer, nobody knew about it. And I got emailed in a little bit late. And I said, okay, this is a great idea, but looking at our calendar, which our programs puts the calendar in, it's updated every month and it's kind of online, but really that program of work is in our board report every month, and this conflicted with another event. And so programs hadn't been engaged, and they were talking about getting sponsors, but sponsorship wasn't engaged. And there were sponsors that have paid for something in the future that hadn't yet been assigned. So there are just some gaps. So sometimes I think the board is really there to make sure that we're all working together cohesively, but the bulk of the work happens at the committee level. So I don't know if that was a little haphazard there, but it's kind of the way we've done it for a while, and it seems to work quite well.
No, I think that was a great compliment to the question Barbara asked earlier about how to, kind of make sure that everyone's communicating and talking. Does anyone have questions for Jill about anything she said? Laura, would you be willing to share a little bit about Crew Boston's? I don't mean to put you on the spot. I didn't talk to you beforehand, but
no problem. Yeah, so Crew Boston also just went through this process last year. And we've actually tried before to become a strategic board, and we tried it for a year, and then all of a sudden we went back to the normal phases. So this year we decided to hire a consultant to come in and just kind of talk to us really what the difference is, why, the benefits of it. And it really helped the board make that step. The buy-in was definitely there from the beginning. We found that out very quickly as soon as we started talking about this, but the consultant really helped us get us talking. He asked those questions that we all knew we had to ask, but sometimes when you have that third party asking those questions and telling you the things that you already know, it just sits in a little bit better, and it takes hold. So I thought that was a huge help to us, because like I said, I've been with Crew for over 20 years. I'm currently their executive director, and before that I was their director of operations. So I've seen how we've functioned throughout the years, and I've seen us try to make it a strategic jump, but just couldn't get there in the past. So I think, for us, that was a key to having someone else come in and just kind of say what we already knew, but when someone else says it, you kind of take it in a little bit more. So we're just wrapping up our first year as a strategic board, so we still have a little bit ways to go to see how it goes, but it's going well, and I think it's going to help us with succession planning, because our board members are so burnt out, and we were having trouble get people to become the board because they're like, well, it's a board member, they have to chair committees, and it was a lot of work we were putting on our board, and we were struggling with getting people to apply to the board. So this way, we're kind of taking them off that and having them think more strategically for organizations. So far, so good.
thank you, Laura. And it's always amazing when you ask other people to help, and then you say, if you can motivate them. Look at all of you. You are here because you believe in the mission of Crew. You delegate stuff. At work, you delegate projects. So let others help. We are all type A. That is so hard to do. But if you ask your members, to help, and you can break things up into, I call them micro tasks for committees. Everyone may not be able to commit to, doing committee work for an entire year, but you can say, we can give you a micro task or two, and then just encourage and motivate. You'll have a lot more applicants for board members if they know that their job isn't to be a worker bee.
Yeah, I will say this year, just the fact that we were telling people we were making this change without making the full change yet, we had probably double the amount of applications we've had in the past. So we actually, we had to turn people down, which we don't typically have to do too often. We had to turn a lot of people down and say, but keep applying extra year. So just that alone, we saw that's the importance of it. Yeah.
And the board liaison can just mentor those committee chairs. And it builds great relationships. And then it can teach the process to the future leaders. So,
yeah, and just one other thing I'm happy to share is one thing that we learned, which I think was so important, is how as members, you have to wear many different hats. And so when you're making decisions, you have to wear certain hats. So when you're at a board meeting, you have to wear your board member hat. When you're on a committee, you're wearing your committee meeting hat, or you're just a general member. So the decisions you make at the board level might be different than what you want to make at the committee level, because the committee's goals are different, not the goals, but how you get there, where the board might be like, no, that's not what we want to do. So you have to step aside, like what you talked about, unconscious, the bias. You know, you have to take yourself out of the picture and say what's best for the organization, and do that. So it's we talk about wearing different hats depending where you're at in the organization.
Great, Laura. Well, I have had Lori from Crew Nashville and Dawn from Crew San Antonio. Do either one of you want to pipe in? We've got, you know, about 8 minutes left. Share any nuggets?
I put it in the chat. We transitioned, we actually have a member who in our chapter that does this. So she helped, we're in our 3rd year transitioning to a strategic because we were the same thing y'all are saying. Our board was burned out and we had no succession planning. I mean, it was just getting to be a struggle. So this year as president, I tasked every director they had to get a chair. So they all have gotten chairs, which helped them get committees. And at first they all looked at me like I was crazy, chairs. But they're all loving it now and it's going great. We've got a good pipeline for our succession planning and it just keeps getting better and better. And it really helped us engage the newer members and the younger members. So we're enjoying being strategic versus working a lot.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add to that. Similar circumstances. Plus, Nashville is still transitioning from being a local chapter for many, many years to the network. So it was kind of a pricey decision, but we just felt like we needed to take that leap to have some assistance. We can't do everything all the time. So we are excited that we have hired Elke Laughlin. You guys may have been familiar with her, and I believe that it was Tampa that gave us some information on her, but she is actually going to plan a day with anyone interested in the chapter to attend, but specifically new board, old board, strategic planning, moving forward and setting goals. So we're pretty excited about that. So
Thank you. Well, we talked a lot about strategic boards in this last little bit. What everyone is talking about is strategic leadership. So even if you have an operational board, if you're a smaller chapter, you can still have these same ideals. Even if you are working and you're very involved in the day-to-day, just try to help keep everyone focused and communicate and share the load, you know, try to get people more involved. That'll make it easier when you actually do try to make the official leap to a strategic board, and you don't get a stamp or anything. It's not like you get a certification that you're a strategic board now, but it's just a growth and a progression. So, all right. Oh, can you share the consultant's information? It's Elke, and she's actually a crew member. You can find her in the directory. You can find her in the speaker directory too. ELKE is her first name. I'm betting she's the only Elke in our membership. So, but if you do need more information, you can reach out to me or Lori or LaShawn. We are all familiar with Elke.
I had a quick question for the other folks on here. So similar to what Jill said, we hold an incoming leadership retreat with our current folks and the new folks coming in. And one of the things that we try to do is have like a morning piece where we maybe have a facilitator of some kind that kind of comes in and talks about this communication, this leadership, and then afternoon kind of do something a little fun. We did an escape room once. Have any of you guys done that and have any resources? I was hopeful that this could be an in-person situation, but not really sure now because we're planning mid-November. Has anyone that they used for or topics that they did this with? Again, it's a little far out, but it's really going to be here in a minute. So just looking for suggestions. No? Okay.
I know that Elsie said that she would be available virtually because I had to ask the question looming over all of our heads, but I probably think most speakers would be available to that situation, but she specifically said she's available for that type of input. So, and we have her for the end of October, so kind of the same time frame.
Well, and if you want to go a little bit different route, we do the same thing every November. And in the past, we had somebody local come in who does disc assessments. And so we were able to get into groups and see how we can understand each other's, rating on the disc assessment and how to work together.
Yeah, we've done a strength finders coach too. So if you ever need a resource like that.
I don't know what that is. A strength finder.
Oh,
That's an interesting proposition. Okay, great.
yeah, I love strength finders. I'm a big believer in it. It's such a great tool for everyone to understand what they're really good at and focus on that. So that's what the whole philosophy is. It's a great little assessment. I prefer it over DISC, but everyone has their own preference.
Yeah, we've done a like probably 5 years ago, we did a disc.
Yeah.
So that could be, yeah, I'll Google that. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, for me, strength finders has been like a life changer because it just makes sense who you are. And then it's put into words and I'm like, oh, that's why I think this way. This is why someone else thinks differently. So
oh, great. So
it's
something
really
that
great.
would really help people understand,
Yeah, it's a
again, who they're going to be
benefit to them.
working with.
Right.
Great.
Benefit to them and also a benefit to your committees and to your board.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Kelly.
Mhm.
I love all the questions and the collaboration. You are all awesome. Anyone else have questions? Anything else to add? I want to be cognizant of time here, and I know we got 1 minute left. So. All right. Thank you to all of you. Oh, Barbara has one. Go, Barbara. No? Oh, you're muted. All right.
Never mind.
Thanks to everyone. It was great to chat with you.